All rise. The Superior Court of the State of Washington and in 4 County of King is now in session. Honorable Stephen E. Moore presiding. Please be seated.
Childhood sexual abuse happens in many different ways. But most often children are victimized repeatedly by someone they know in an atmosphere of secrecy. That's why criminal prosecution of the offender usually is needed to protect the child from continuing assaults. Yet it is these young victims who suffer most under criminal justice procedures and who are thereby placed in double jeopardy.
You've heard the court read the information in this case. That information charges the defendant, Mr. James Martinez, with the crime of incest, alleged to have occurred between November of 1975 and May of 1976. Charge of incest indicates the defendant had sexual intercourse with his daughter. The state's primary witness in this case will be the defendant's daughter, Coco Martinez, age 14. You will hear Coco's testimony, and you will hear her indicate that the sexual advances by her father began at a much earlier time period, and that in fact it was so early on it's very difficult for her to remember precisely when it did begin. But she remembers an approximate age of 5 years old. You will hear her specific testimony as to how this began with caressing and fondling in the bedroom and how it progressed very gradually to full intercourse.
When a child blows the whistle on a sexually abusive adult, she's the one who usually becomes the focus of stress and resentment.
Their family and some of the fathers leave and all kinds of things can happen. How about you, Coco? What happened after you told?
My sister and my mother and I all lived together. We moved out, and my brother lived with my father. And, well, my father told my brother that when I was 6 years old, I molested my father.
Your father told your brother that you molested your father?
I molested my father.
Did your brother believe that?
Yeah. My dad's very convincing.
Yeah.
My grandmother won't talk to me. My uncle won't talk to me.
Well, my mom, after she found out, she didn't believe me. And by then I was living in a receiving home.
She didn't believe that it had happened to you?
No. And we talked a lot, and she still didn't believe me. I had no doubt that she wasn't going to believe me. My mom still hasn't believed me, and she's not going to change her mind.
So no matter what you've done, and you actually had a trial about this.
Oh, yeah. We just went into trial last week.
And what happened?
Well, it was scary.
Mm-hmm. You had to testify. You had to get up in the stand and everything by yourself?
I had to testify. Me and a friend testified for me, and my mother and my aunt and one of my other friends who's living with my mom now, and my stepfather and my brother and everybody else testified against me.
They all lined up against you in court?
Yeah.
When I was about 8 years old, my mom sent my father to a psychiatrist, and he went for about 6 months or so, I guess, and after a few more months, he started in again. And it went on and on until I was 13, and I turned him in. And he went to a therapist for a year, and he started after 6 months, so he was still in therapy when he started again. And then in December, he moved away, so that was the end of that. And I'm really glad that it's over now, but I don't think he'll ever stop. I don't think he'll ever get better.
And ever since I blew the whistle or told somebody, they've kind of been joking or making fun of me or just not taking it seriously and paying a lot of attention to my sister and how she's going to react to it. And so I yelled at him and told him that that wasn't fair to worry about, my sister, and just kind of pushed me aside because I was the one that needed help. It happened to me and not her.
I didn't want her to tell my brothers about the incest, but she got so angry with me, she just blurted it out.
In front of your brother?
In front of my brother sitting right there.
Yeah.
And I just got really angry.
That must have made you feel pretty bad.
Yeah. My mom was pretty shocked herself hearing about the incest.
Mm-hmm.
And, well, she told my dad that he can't see us kids anymore So that must have triggered off a lot of bad, guilty feelings about everything.
With your father?
Yeah. And then a little while later, he killed himself.
Mrs. Martinez, you're Coco's mother, aren't you?
Yes, I am.
Mrs. Martinez, did there come a time when Coco told you about what was happening with her father?
Yes, she did when she was 10.
How did that come about?
She took me aside and told me that her daddy...
Objection, Your Honor. Question calls for hearsay.
Ms. Bowdy, does the state wish to respond?
Yes, Your Honor. Do you wish to have the jury excused while we address this issue?
As long as this kind of testimony is not offered to
Seems
prove
me, Your
the
Honor,
truth
that under
of the
state
assertion
states, this would
and
be
is introduced
unauthorized.
simply to show how a course of action developed, hearsay rules generally do not apply.
The witness may answer.
She told me that her daddy was making her play with him.
Did Coco explain to you what play with him meant?
Yes, in her words, it was, Daddy makes me touch his pee-pee.
What did you do when you learned this information, Mrs. Martinez?
Well, first of all, I told her that I would see to it that she was never left alone with Daddy again, and that if anything like that ever happened again, to please come tell me. And then I immediately, later, when Father came home, confronted him with it, and he denied it.
What did you do after your husband denied this?
I believed him.
Pardon?
I believed him.
Mrs. Martinez, did there come a time when Coco again complained to you?
Yes, she did. 4 years later, I received a letter from her.
What had happened to your family in that intervening 4 years?
Her father and I had been divorced, and she was living with her father.
All right. At the time of the divorce, was Coco with you?
Yes.
And at what point did she then go to live with her father?
Colleen and I were having problems between ourselves, and life was pretty miserable for both of us, and she was seeing a counselor. And the counselor suggested that she would be better off with her father.
Now, you say you received a letter from her.
Yes, I did.
When did that come?
On Mother's Day.
And what did the letter indicate?
It just came right out and said that that her father was making her have intercourse with him.
What did you do when you received that letter?
I fell apart. I went and to her school and kidnapped her and brought her to be with me. And then I took the letter and asked her father to meet me in a public place, and I presented the letter to him, and he denied it again. And I told him that one of them was lying, and I wasn't going to stop till I found out who. And that was pretty much the end of the conversation. He still denied it.
All right. After your husband denied it, did you take any action next?
Oh, yes.
And what did you do?
We called the Sexual Assault Center and made an appointment for Colleen to see Lucy Berliner. And I can't remember if we called the Children's Protective Service or if Lucy did. She was taken to the police to give a report.
In sexual abuse cases of all kinds, interviews can be traumatic, especially for young children.
You don't know the exact date?
No.
The day?
No.
What time of the day was it?
Sometime a little bit after 3.
A little bit after 3. A little bit after 3. Okay. And where did this happen?
Up at my grandma and grandpa's apartment.
Uh-huh. At the apartment?
Yeah.
In the apartment house?
In his.
In his, uh-huh. Okay, fine. Now why don't you tell me exactly what happened? Now, wait a second. I'll make a phone call here. Hello. Oh, Frank? Listen, can you meet me at about 4 o'clock this afternoon? Go out and have a couple of drinks, okay? Sounds great. Fine, all right. See you then. Bye-bye. Now, you're going to tell me exactly what happened?
Yeah, I was outside playing with a friend.
Wait, no, you take it. You're outside playing with your friends, okay? Outside playing with your friends. And?
And this guy went by.
And this guy went by?
He said hello.
And said hello. Is that all he said?
And he said...
Did you say anything to him first?
No. He said he had a surprise for us.
He said he had a surprise. Just a second. He said he had a surprise for you. Okay, now this was sometime in October?
Yeah.
You don't know what day of the week it was. About 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I'd say, okay, fine. Now, you know this fellow's going to get into a lot of trouble, don't you?
Yes.
You know he's probably going to go to jail
Yes.
for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
You know the trouble it's going to cause to everybody else that knows him? To
Yes.
his family?
Yes.
Uh-huh. And you're still willing to do this? Why do you want to get him into trouble? Why do you want to cause this fellow trouble? You know they're going to have to make a lie detector test. You're going to have to take a lie detector test about this.
What's that?
That means they're going to have to hook some wires up to you, make sure you're telling the truth. Will you still tell exactly the same story when that happens?
Yes.
Uh-huh. All right. So you were playing outside with some friends. This fellow came up and said hello. He said I had a surprise for you.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. All right.
And he said, why don't we go up to that guy's house and get the squirt gun?
He said, why don't you go up to the guy's house and get the squirt? What squirt gun was this?
That was a surprise.
That was a surprise. He told you he had a squirt gun for you.
Mm-hmm.
Uh-huh. He didn't tell you he had a surprise. He said he had a squirt gun.
Yeah.
Why did you say earlier that he said he had a surprise for you?
It's the same thing.
Well, it's not.
From the very first interview, the child is likely to encounter disbelief and insensitivity. Little attention is paid to the special vulnerabilities and capabilities associated with developmental stages of childhood.
Why'd you say that? Why'd you tell me that that's what he said?
Dr. Anderson, as a pediatrician, you've had a lot of experience with children victims of incest, haven't you?
Yes, I've seen several hundred of them by now.
Seems to me that one of the possible attacks by the defense counsel will be this discrepancy in time. At one point, Coco gave a statement to the police indicating that the sexual messing around by her father with her began about 4 years ago. At another point, she indicates that it was 9 years ago. I would imagine the defense attorney is going to try to hit that issue and impeach her. Do you think you could give some testimony that might explain this or put this behavior in a larger context?
Well, I think we have some points that should be, fairly acceptable. Number one, children don't think in the same time frames that adults do, and we have to go back to their level. And rather than talking in terms of years, it's much more appropriate to talk in terms of events, to focus in upon when an incident did or did not occur. The fact that she may not understand the number of years ago is totally irrelevant. Using a child's frame of reference, birthdays, important happenings in the family or to her are far more relevant to pinpoint when an incident occurred. Secondly, you have to be very specific and concrete for children. And when you are asked about sexual messing around or sexual activity, perhaps the questions were asked in a way that she interpreted as being something that occurred 5 years ago as opposed to something that occurred 9 years ago. And so you need to look at what it is they were asking specifically. She may be perfectly correct in what she was saying, but relating to two different things, like the handling, secondly, the oral contact, or when the intercourse actually occurred. And that might be what she's responding to instead of the differences in time frames. I think this is what you're looking
Absolutely.
for.
I think this is precisely what we want by way of testimony.
Good afternoon. My name is Dennis, and let me see. I'm sorry, I've forgotten what your name was. What? Could you tell me your name again?
By the time a case goes to court, a child may have puzzled her way through a half-dozen different interviews.
Okay, thank you, Tona, for coming down today. I sure appreciate that. I wanted to just say a couple things about what my job is here, and then we'll try to get directly to the matter at hand, and you can go out and play in this lovely weather. I'm a prosecutor. It's my job to prosecute cases, felonious or misdemeanors. All of them come through this office, and it's our job to take them to court, to put together evidence which is probative and admissible, and present a case to a judge which is going to convince them beyond any reasonable doubt, which is the standard of proof in this case, that in fact a criminal act has in fact taken place. And so one of the Dennis Nolan. Yeah, the right case has been continued. We moved it over to September 2nd. Yeah, that's fine. Yes, thank you very much for calling. Right. Bye. Okay, let's see, where were we? We were talking about what my job was, and I think basically that's it. Do you have any questions at all about what's going on here? Anything that you'd like to know before we start?
Yeah, why do I have to keep on saying this over and over again?
Well, it's sort of a function of the various jobs which the detective that talked to you. Oh,
Please sign this, please.
right. Thank you. Did you make the revision that I asked on page 10?
Yes, it's all there.
Okay, that's very good. Great. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Sorry about that, Tom. Well, the reason, of course, is that the police have a different job than we do. Their function is to assemble facts, put the case together for us, and they bring it on down here, and we decide what to do with it, basically. And it's, like I said earlier, it's our job to provide a court with admissible evidence which is going to live up to the standard of proof in criminal cases, which is beyond a reasonable doubt. I don't know really any other way to say it than that. Now, as I understand it, the conduct that we're dealing with here took place over a large period of time. Is that correct? I've read some of the police reports here, and as I understand it, the first event was about a year ago. Is that right? Okay. And just for the record, do you know the name of the man that assaulted you in this way?
It was something like Freddie.
Something like Freddie. Okay. And when Freddie assaulted you in this way, did he ejaculate at all? Do you remember whether or not he ejaculated during the course of the sexual advance? Well, it's... excuse me. Yes, Stanislaw. Oh, yeah. I'll be right up. Yeah, thank you very much. Excuse me, Tom, I have to go take a break. There's a worker out in the hall that you can stay with. I'll be back in there.
So how you doing?
Fine.
Throughout the tedious and protracted prosecution procedure, it's imperative that a child advocate be involved in a consistently supportive way.
Kind of.
Okay. Well, the worst thing that could happen, Coco, even if they find him not guilty, is that, you know, we wouldn't be able to force him to get the kind of help that he needs so he doesn't do this anymore. But you'll know even then that, you know, we believed you and that the prosecutor believed you and the detective believed you and believed you enough to go through all of that. And it's important that you not, you know, let that make the difference for you. And it would be good if they do believe you, but there's so many things they won't know about you and about the whole situation that sometimes it can go against you.
No, if they didn't believe me, it wouldn't matter because he wouldn't get help anyway.
That's right. That's right. Do you want him to get help? Is that what you want to happen?
Yeah. I just think someone who's sick like that needs help and should get it.
Right. That's exactly right. Do you think you're going to be able to hang in there through all of this?
Well, I'll try. I've got Mom and Ted.
Mm-hmm. We're all behind you. You got to keep talking about it. Don't keep it all inside you. Because you know what happens when you do that.
Yeah.
You get into trouble. Right?
Right. But I haven't been keeping it all inside.
Good deal. That's good.
Coco, could you tell the jury your full name?
Coco Martinez.
Okay, Coco, how old are you?
14.
And where do you go to school?
Kellogg.
I know it won't be easy for you to talk about this, Coco, but I need to ask you some questions. Can you tell the jury when your father first approached you sexually?
When I was 5.
Right. And how did that come about?
Well, we'd all be in the room watching TV in my mom and dad's bedroom. And then he'd send my mom and my sister and my brother to the store.
Now, what would happen when your mother and your brother and your sister would all be sent to the store?
Me and my dad would be left in his bedroom watching TV.
And where would you be?
On the bed.
All right, and what would happen? Can you tell the jury what would happen?
He'd just start touching me.
And can you tell the jury where he would touch you? Where on your body?
The vagina.
Did your father say anything to you when he would do this?
No. He wouldn't talk.
He wouldn't talk. Did he say anything to you about your talking or your telling?
He told me not to tell.
Did he do anything else to you? Did he touch you any other place?
No.
All right. Now, at some point, this changed, didn't it?
Objection, Your Honor. Counsel's leading the witness.
The point's well taken. Counsel will be admonished by the fact of the objection.
Did his advances toward you change? Did they become more or less? Or did they change in any way?
Yeah.
And when did that change take place?
About a couple, 1 or 2 years later.
And what would happen between you and your father?
What would he make me do?
Yes, what would happen? What would he do to you, or what would he say?
Well, he'd tell me to,
Can you tell the jury?
well, he'd tell me to suck him.
And where were you supposed to suck him, Coco?
His penis.
Did it happen more than once?
Yeah.
Do you know how many times more than once?
No.
Would it be fair to say it would be more than 5 times?
Yeah.
All right. Did there come a time when his behavior changed?
Yeah.
When was that?
About a year later.
And how old would you have been at that time, or what grade of school would you have been in?
About 2nd grade. Would have been about 7.
All right. What happened when you were 7 years old?
That's when, it was full intercourse.
Okay, and do you know what full intercourse means?
Mm-hmm.
Could you tell the jury what that means?
That's when, he puts his penis in my vagina.
Coco, did there come a time when you told anybody about what was happening between you and your father?
Yes.
Who did you tell?
My mother.
When was that?
When I was about 10.
And what happened when you told your mother?
She didn't, well, she kind of believed me, but then she asked my dad.
And what happened after that?
Well, he denied it, so she believed him.
Did you ever have occasion to tell her again or to talk to her again?
Not to talk to her.
Okay, how did you communicate with her?
When I told her again?
Right, when you told her again.
I wrote it in a letter.
Joint interviews are one way to reduce the number of times a child must tell her story. This requires close cooperation between agencies, such as Child Protective Services, the prosecutor's office, and the police. Ideally, a special child's interview room should be set up with appropriate toys and furniture.
So what's happened here is that Tammy and another neighbor girl were molested by a man in the neighborhood, and was fondling, strictly fondling. No penetration or anything like that.
No penetration. Fine. I think that's enough. Why don't you bring her in?
Okay, I'll go get her. Tammy, do you remember yesterday when Rebecca and I were talking with you a little bit?
Mm-hmm.
And we said we were going to come into this office and meet our friend Greg?
Yeah.
Well, this is Greg.
Hi, Greg.
Hi, Tammy.
And today, Rebecca and Greg and I are going to talk with you a little bit about some of the things that happened.
Okay.
Okay?
Can you remember the neighborhood man? You remember him?
Yeah.
Okay, can you tell me a little bit about what happened? Greg needs to know what happened with him.
I was just going over to Sheila's, and she asked me if we wanted to have a picnic, and so she just took out the blanket and she was getting stuff ready.
Okay. What happened next?
We were eating some stuff, and Sheila gave some of the food to the man.
Okay. Did he eat some food? Okay. What happened after he ate some food?
He showed us some wedding pictures.
Wedding pictures? Can you tell me a little bit more about the pictures?
There were 2 beach pictures.
Was there anybody in the pictures?
Mm-hmm. there was a little boy who was naked, and then they showed another picture of a boy who was naked, and you could see the front of him.
Were they boys about your age or younger?
Well,
Yeah.
what do you think, Greg?
Well, is what she told us today basically what she told you before? Same kind of information, same basic facts?
Basically the same. Did you note any discrepancies today, Rebecca?
A little bit of differences in sequence.
Greg, what do you think of the chances of filing charges in this case?
The only real problem with the case at this point is the discrepancies between what she told the police originally and what she told us today. I don't think that's any real problem. You really have to expect that with a child that age. She's not going to be able to tell you everything exactly in the order that it happened, the same 2 or 3 different times in a row.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm really hopeful because prosecution in this particular case is really important. It's important to Tammy and her family, and I think it's really important because we need to start taking more of these cases in if we're going to do something about this problem.
Yeah.
You know, I think we've got to start with that.
She seems to be able to talk about it fairly easily, and that's real important for her being a good witness, and she's got a lot of support from her family, so I think that she should be able to get through the process all right.
I think based on what she's told us today, there's a good chance. She seems to be able to hold up very well and explain what happened to adults. She doesn't really know that well. I think with those things in mind, and get some more follow-up work on the case from the police, and I think we'll have a good case.
Brian, I want you to meet 2 people that have come over to talk to you this afternoon. This is Gary, and
Hi, Brian.
Hi.
he's a detective for the police department, like, you know, our friend Les down in Tacoma. And this is Sue,
Hi, Brian.
and
Hi.
she works with families and kids that have trouble. And
A productive interview requires willingness to meet the child on his own level and to spend time putting him at ease.
Thank you. Go ahead and sit down there, Brian. How you doing?
Fine.
Is this your football?
Yeah.
Do you like football?
Yep.
Do you?
I'll bet you do.
Yeah. Mama has been talking to us about something that happened to you. And I think she explained a little bit to you about us coming over to talk. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Would you like to sit down on the floor? Let's sit down on the floor so we can get a little closer together, okay?
Then you'll be able to show me if you can throw that football in a little while, huh? You pretty good at that?
Yeah.
We want to talk to you about something that happened to you, and I'd like to turn a tape recorder on while we talk. Is that okay with you?
All right.
Huh?
Have you ever seen a tape recorder before?
Mm-hmm.
Have you? Do you use them in school?
No.
Have you ever heard your voice being recorded or played back on a tape recorder?
I heard it before.
You
A
did?
lot of times.
How do
A
you
lot of
sound?
times.
Do you sound like yourself?
A little bit. Sounds like my friends a little bit.
Do you sound like your friend?
Yeah.
Which friend do you sound like?
His name is Jeff.
Yeah.
What grade are you in at school, Brian?
First grade, but I used to be in my own school. The name of the school is Ravenna, and I'm going to, where am I going? I can't
You mean you get
remember.
to change schools and you can't remember, huh?
Yeah.
You ready to start school again?
Mm-hmm.
Looking forward to it?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I've got the tape recorder on now.
All right.
Okay, we'll play it for a little bit, and then I'll play it back for you to make sure that it's working.
Child witnesses have no more protection under the law than do adults. They must try to cope with persistent defense attempts to impeach and discredit them.
And during this total period of time, you indicated you didn't know the exact number of times that the activity took place, but perhaps more than 5, is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
You also indicated that at least during the last year of this activity with your father that he'd been doing it approximately once a week. Did you tell the police that?
Mm-hmm.
How many weeks are in a year? Do you have any idea?
No.
Don't know how-
50-something.
50-some weeks in a year. So then would it be a fair statement that this activity you indicated was going on before the last year, is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and during the last year it was approximately once a week, perhaps as many as 50 times.
Mm-hmm.
How many times did you tell your mother that this activity was taking place?
I told her once before all this came out, and then I told her again. That's when she came and got me.
All right, now, you told her the first time. This was about how long ago?
When I was 10.
So approximately 4 years ago?
Mm-hmm.
And in spite of the fact that this was taking place on perhaps a weekly basis, you still didn't tell her again for a period of about 4 years, is that right?
Mm-hmm.
So would it be a fair statement to say that your mother genuinely did not believe what you told her approximately 4 years ago, or she wouldn't have sent you to live with her father?
Objection. It calls for a conclusion.
All right, I'll withdraw the question, Your Honor.
Very well.
Now, you indicated that you sent this last letter to your mother on Mother's Day, is that right?
Mm-hmm.
And you've been staying with your father for about a year at that point. And would it be a fair statement to say that you really didn't want to live with your father, but you wanted to go back and live with your mother?
Mm-hmm.
And that you really didn't want to live with your father?
Yeah.
And during this, I guess, Mother's Day letter that you sent, you knew that if you'd sent a letter like that to your mother or made this type of report that it would upset her, didn't you?
I didn't know it upset her. I knew she'd do something.
And the thing that you knew that she would do, you were hoping that she would take you from your father and take you back into her home. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
Which would have been against the advice of your counselor and at least against her previous wishes. But you wanted to get back there, is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
Isn't it a fact that you were having some really pretty serious problems at school before your mother sent you over to live with your father?
Not much.
Well, isn't it a fact that you were missing school during the time that you were living with your mother?
Yeah.
And, well, it's a fact that you were smoking against your mother's wishes, is that right?
No.
Or were you smoking?
Yeah.
And that was with your mother's permission?
Yeah.
And ultimately, your mother sent you to live with your father because she didn't think she could control you, or because the psychologist thought that it was probably better for you to live there. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
Now, isn't it a fact, Ms. Martinez, that you got the idea to report this incident or to say what you claim happened with your father from one of the kids in the neighborhood?
Mm-hmm.
The same principles that apply to interviews by criminal justice and protective services personnel also hold true for pediatric exams.
Yeah?
Yeah, what for?
So you can check me head to toe.
Your mama tell you that?
Yeah?
Good. That's exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to look you over from top to bottom, your ears and your nose and throat and tummy and your bottom, make sure everything's all okay. Okay? The social worker talked to me about your problems, and so we pretty much know what we need to do today. Okay? Jesse, I'm going to do anything at all that hurts, okay?
Okay.
You've been to the doctor for checkups before? Okay. And what's the doctor do?
Checks you and make sure you're okay.
Okay. What I'm going to do is a little bit different today, okay? I have a funny little cotton swab. See that? Okay? Doesn't hurt, does it? It's just a tickle thing, right? Yeah. I'm going to tickle maybe your throat and your bottom with that little cotton swab, okay? And I'm not going to do anything that's scary. And you can tell me if you want me to wait a minute, okay? Okay. Has Jessie had any problems at all? You know, is stomach ache, sore bottom, vaginal discharge, any complaints going to the bathroom?
There hasn't seemed to be any so far.
Good. Jessie, anything that you're worried about that's bothering you? No sore tummy or pains anyplace? That's really good. Okay. What I have to do now then is you put a gown on so I can look at you, okay? Which one do you want to wear?
The blue one.
Okay. Here it is. It's a funny gown. See, it ties in the back. You have to take off all your clothes and put the gown on. I'll be back in a couple of minutes to see you. Okay, see you then.
Let's put the gown on.
A courtroom appearance can be a frightening experience for a small child, unless she's well prepared in advance.
Here we are. This is the courtroom that we've been talking about. Here's your chair that you're going to sit in when you tell the judge what happened. So why don't you hop on up there right now and sit on that nice, comfortable pad. Does that feel okay?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Now, this is where you're going to tell the judge what happened. All right? You're going to be doing this on Thursday. Now, I want to show you where everyone's going to be on Thursday. All right? You just looked up at the judge, but that's just Russell. But that's where the judge is going to be seated. Okay? And he's the one that's going to want to hear everything that happened. Now, I'm going to be here. I'm going to be seated right over here. in this far chair. And right next to me will be Russell. Also, someone else is going to be here. Brian. Now, Brian's going to be right over in that chair. And right next to him will be his lawyer. Now, Brian is here on Thursday, but don't let that bother you because other people are going to be here. I'm going to be here. Russell's going to be here. Orlando's going to be here. Your mom's going to be here. And Detective Armstrong's going to be here. Now, there are going to be some questions asked. And I'm going to be the first one that asks the questions. So, what I'd like to do right now is just ask you a couple of questions. Jessica, the first question I'll ask you is, what is your name?
Jessica.
And I'll ask you, where do you live?
Kirkland.
And where do you go to school, Jessica?
John Muir Elementary School.
Who's your teacher?
Mrs. Marker.
I'll ask you questions like that, and then on Thursday, I'll ask you what happened with Brian, okay? And then, when I'm all finished, something else will happen.
Jessica, after Mike is through with his questioning, Brian's attorney, defense attorney, will also ask you some questions. And when he does ask those questions, you don't have to look at Brian. You can look at the judge, or answer to Mike, or look at me and your mom in the back in the first row.
Okay? Will you be ready to do this on Thursday?
Yeah.
You're ready to tell the judge the whole truth?
Yeah.
Okay, we're ready too. Great.
Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, have you reached a verdict?
Yes, Your Honor, we have.
Please read that verdict.
We, the members of the jury, find the defendant, James Martinez, guilty as charged.
Thank you. This matter will be continued for sentencing to Wednesday, the 4th of October at 8:45 a.m. in this courtroom.
Well, it's over. We survived. Coco survived.
She won?
Thank God
They
it
won?
turned out the way we wanted it to.
Mm-hmm. How's she
So-
doing now?
She's doing okay. She's doing okay. I think it was really terrific for her to
Mhm.
hear that 12 people that she didn't know and who didn't know a lot of the things about the case believed her. And I think that's the best thing that could come out of it.
So do you think it was all worth it?
I guess I sort of feel that for these kids, if they are able to stand up for themselves and to go through the whole thing, even if it's hard, then in the long run, that's worth it.
I think it really depends on who the kid is, though. I mean, Coco maybe, could do it and wanted to do it, but a lot of these kids, you really have to wonder if it's worth it to put them through it, or to help them through it. I guess we're not putting them through it.
But I think, if we don't do it, we have absolutely no leverage in getting the offender into treatment, and we know that. We know they don't go into treatment unless they're adjudicated.
Right. Well, I hope that her dad will stop denying it, because since our goal in all this is to get him into some kind of treatment, that's the first step. And I think probably, now that he realizes that, people believe her and that he's been convicted, that he'll realize that his best shot is to admit it, and so we can get him some kind of appropriate treatment.
Well, that's where I think it's important with the case assessment. In writing up the recommendations, it would also involve all parties. Not only her father, but Coco herself and Mom.
Well, the one thing that we really have to keep in mind now is that there's likely to be a big letdown for Coco and her mom with all this
In
tension
thousands
built
of
up.
jurisdictions across the nation, the innocent victims of child sexual abuse still remain in double jeopardy. They still are subject to repeated interviews conducted by insensitive adults. They still must endure prolonged adjudication and demeaning courtroom interrogation. Not until we reform our judicial procedures and sensitize individuals within the system will we begin to ease their tragic and lonely ordeal.